want to say I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope everyone has a happy holidays going forward into December. Today, we'll be talking about, like Andy said, sake. Our title for this session is called um, Raising New Japan Spirits Through the Power of Nihonshu. And this month, been given a precursor of what sorts of possibilities in terms of programming or events are possible through the power of sake. And what better way to kind of explore that topic than by having two of our guests here today who want to speak on that as well. We have Chip Meyer, Executive Director of the Japan American Society of St. Louis. And we also have Mr. Weston Konishi, President of Sake Brewers Association of North America. So the way we plan it for today is that we'll start off with Chip, and he'll have some words of what he's been doing in St. Louis in terms of sake events and programming. And then from that, we'll transition into Weston in terms of Esbana and what he's been able to do with that in terms of highlighting sake production and sake companies among North America. So thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate your time and your attention. So that's enough for me. Without further ado, I'd like to transition into Chip.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Niles. Thank you also, Andy and Makiko, for making this possible. I'm going to get right into this because I think that the most valuable piece of this will probably be the Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen for a PowerPoint, or technically Google Slides, I guess. So let's see. Here we go. Japan American Society of St. Louis wrote a grant. There we go. That was funded by the Japan Foundation of New York. We proposed to them to do a series of sake tasting events. We proposed 4 events. We really conceived of this as a sandbox series. So the Japan Foundation grant allowed us to think outside the box and try some things in a low-risk environment. So today, I just want to go briefly over what we did, the 4 events that we did, how those events went for us, and what we learned from them. And then in the Q&A, or even after this, please feel free to let me know if you have further questions or want more detail about anything. So the 4 events we did, the first one in April of last year, 2022, was we called it an evening of sake tasting. This was a very structured sit-down tasting of 5 sake with a strong educational lecture component. At the beginning of this project, we enlisted the help of a local sommelier who was getting her certification in sake. Her name is Patricia Wamhoff, so I'll refer to her a few times throughout the rest of this talk here. So this first one, she led this, as I said, very educationally strong, a lot of detail about sake brewing, the nomenclature, regions, techniques, and we had 25 people attend this, again, in a sort of intimate environment in a small space. The second one we did in June, what we called an afternoon of sake tasting. This was sort of the opposite of that first one. So it was self-guided. There were 2 components to it. Had Japanese dancing, a calligrapher, a Purikura photo booth. We had food trucks. And anybody who was at the park that day could just come up and take part in that. I have a sign here saying my internet connection is unstable. Am I still unfrozen for everybody?
Now you blipped for a minute. You're okay.
Okay.
Sorry, can I intervene for just a quick second and ask,
sure.
If you plan to go back, I'd love to know how you handled licensing or ID inspections for the number 2 there. But if you want to address that later on.
So licensing, we were selling on the outdoor free portion of it. We were selling cocktails and beer. So we got what's called here a picnic license, or a temporary liquor license to sell there. The tastings on the inside, we did not have any licensure. We were not selling anything on the inside. So people bought a ticket, they got a card with that was good for 8 tastings. 7 of those were good for sake, and then the 8th one was specifically designated for matcha. So we also had a green tea demonstration going on the inside. So they could taste 7 alcoholic beverages and then 1 green tea beverage on the inside. And those were sake, whiskey, shochu, and beer. Those were the 4 alcoholic beverages going on the inside. In addition to the tea demonstration, we also had a sushi making demonstration, makizushi making demonstration, and a cocktail demonstration. So we had a local bartender who was showing people how to make cocktails using sake. The 3rd event in October of last year was a dinner and sake pairing. So we partnered with a restaurant. It was a 4-course meal, and 3 of those courses were paired with sake, and then the restaurant developed a sake cocktail to serve in the half hour before the meal itself. We had about 30 people attend that. Oh, the afternoon of sake tasting, we had over 150 people. So I think we pre-sold 107 tickets, and then we sold tickets at the door. And then there were folks who just came to the outdoor portion of it and didn't go inside. And we didn't have a great way to track numbers there. So, and then the 4th and final one we did in April of this year, 2023, was a sake cocktail contest. So this was a ticketed spectator event. We had 8 bartenders competing before a panel of 3 judges. They tasted the cocktails and then judged them on various criteria and awarded prizes to the top 3 at the end. We partnered with a bar who hosted this. The bar had a lot of experience in hosting cocktail competitions of other kinds, not just sake. So we basically turned over the logistical components of this to them, and they ran with it. So that was a lot of fun and relatively easy for us. So I think I've gone gourmet food store called Parker's Table here in St. Louis. I think we had space for 30 people, but only 25 people showed up to this one. I only sold tickets for 25. And you can see Patricia there in the lower left picture going through her PowerPoint presentation. And then there were 4 people at each table, and they had a tasting mat with the 5 sakes there. And so she went through and gave a fair amount of detail about the different regions and what to notice about each of the sakes that they were tasting. This was the second one. So you can see here, there was it's public outdoor park. So we were able to have dancing a couple of times over the course of the afternoon there. And then the other pictures you can see on the inside there, filling what's called the Piper Palm House. It's a large, many windowed sort of almost like a greenhouse space. So very light and airy, and people had a lot of fun there. And in the top right corner picture, you can see the tasting card that gentleman is holding, and some of them are marked off at the bottom. So you just take those around to the different stations and get those marked off. This was the restaurant Bellwether, and you can see a couple of the courses in the sake pairings that were offered here. And then in that picture again, you can see Patricia with the map of Japan. So as each sake came out before each course, she would give a little bit of information about what people were going to be tasting and why it was chosen to pair with this particular course. And then the final one, the cocktail contest, this was in a side room of a bar. And the judges in the top right, that was our panel of 3 judges. The lady on the left, Heidi Hamamura, is a Japanese-American caterer here in St. Louis that we use a lot for a lot of our events. The middle person, Meredith Berry, was one of the co-owners of the bar where it was held. And I don't know if you all saw the Netflix series Drink Masters, but it was a cocktail competition series. And Meredith was a contestant on that show. And the gentleman there, Suzu, was another contestant who is in California, but the 2 of them, Meredith and Suzu, became friends through that show. And so she was able to connect with him and bring him in to be sort of a celebrity guest judge on this panel. And then we had a local bartender from a different bar serve as MC for this event. And then the other picture here, you could see this gentleman on the left is in the process of making the cocktail. So he made it there. It was a little bit of theatrics involved with this event. And then the resulting cocktail you can see in the middle there was served in snail shells and garnished with sea grapes. So the bartenders each made four cocktails, one for each of the judges, and then one that was camera ready. And then the final shot there was sort of after everything was all said and done and the awards were given out, that was the shot of some of the contestants there. So how did this go for us? A brief overview of how we tried to get information about how this was experienced by the audience. And we used a couple of different kinds of questions. One was, we had several questions on a 4-point Likert scale. So we always asked what was the event for you. We always ask on how was each component of this event. So for example, the venue, atmosphere, and the content of the presentation, and then the quality of the sake. We tried to get more information about each one of those components of the event. Then the other thing we did was ask people to rank the components of the programs based on which ones were most important to least important. So we're trying to figure out what was drawing people to these events, what did they appreciate about these events, so we knew, trying to get an idea of what to focus on when planning them. So the first one, we charged $50 for members and $60 for non-members. As I said, we had 25 attendees, and it was not a big moneymaker for us. We only netted about $235. The quality, how well it was received, actually the weakest piece of it was the information content. People wanted a lot more detail and a lot more information. Even though I felt like Patricia was giving them a lot, they wanted to spend more time, I think, with each sake. So for that event, I think you really need to focus on really drilling down on the specific sake. And then on this screenshot here of the responses, the thing that I want you to notice is this was a ranking thing. So which ones of these components were most important or least important to you? And this sort of light blue line is the price. So the value that people thought that they were getting. And you can see here that it was among the least important things that people were considering. And so I just want to call your attention to that, plant a flag to that, because I'll come back to that over the course of this feedback. The second one, so this was the large outdoor event. We charged $20 for members, $25 for non-members, and $30 at the door. That, again, is to get to the inside portion of it. The outside portion was free. And I already went over the numbers for you there. This was a pretty decent money maker for us. We made over $1,000. I think that it could be a lot bigger. We didn't get any sponsorships. I think there's potential for sponsorships here. I think we could have gotten a lot more vendors. And I think we could have gotten a lot more people there. It was our first year, and getting the word out was a challenge. The way it was received, again, 82% gave it a 4, 18% gave it a 3, nobody gave it a 2 or a 1, and everybody rated it as an excellent value for that at that price point. And then among the things that people were most interested in, tasting the sake was the most important. So this was in comparison to the venue, being able to be there with friends, socializing aspects, the value of it, and then also the cultural components. Because again, as I say, we had tea tasting, sake making, cocktail making, and those other things. So people were really there for the tastings. And again, notice the purple is the value question. So here again, more people were interested in it, but still it was toward the lower end of things that people were really worried about, was the value that they were getting. The third one, the dinner and sake pairing, this was a pricier one, $130 for members, $145 for non-members. So we got a price from the restaurant, a per person price, and then we just added a little bit of upcharge to that. Restaurant said we could fit 40 people in there. It was pretty crowded at 30. So I would look at that to make sure that it's actually going to be comfortable for folks. And we made $640 on this on a pretty easy event for us to execute. The restaurant, the event itself, I think largely due to the restaurant, got 100% top marks for quality. And then people ranked the value as 67% great value, 33% 3. Again, the price value was ranked as the least important aspect of this. And then finally, the sake cocktail contest, 25 members, $30 for non-members. We maxed this out. We couldn't have gotten more people in there. In fact, we set a cap of 50 people in that space. We had extra people show up because some of our partners were bringing in some of their friends and getting them in there. We got a sponsorship for this event, and so we made a fair amount of money on it. The bar did not charge us to use their space, but I think they made a fair amount of money on it because they had 60 extra people in their bar that night that they were selling cocktails to. They had developed a set of specialty sake cocktails for this event that they were then selling to the bar patrons. And the overall quality on this one was a little bit lower than the other ones. I think this was due in some part because people were disgruntled at the fact that people were coming up and getting into the event because they knew people. It was a little bit difficult to control the traffic flow, and then we had a lot of partners that wanted to bring folks in. And the main piece of feedback here is people wanted to be able to taste the cocktails. We couldn't offer that at this one. As you saw, it would be very difficult to make cocktails in snail shells for 50 people and distribute them without dumping them on people, right? So what we learned, for me, the overarching thing, the most important thing that I think we learned from this is that you have to find one or two strong industry partners for these events to carry you through them. For us, it was a distributor. We've worked for a long time with a distributor, Lore Distributing here in St. Louis. They help us with our Japanese festival, and they're really interested in building sake in their portfolio. But this distributor knows restaurants and liquor stores and importers to be able to connect us to all of those other folks. And so the distributor knew the bartenders that owned the bar where we did the cocktail contest. They knew the importer so they could get the cocktails. They knew a liquor store that was willing to donate some of the ingredients to the bartenders that were competing to sort of offset their costs. And they knew a producer, McCormick Distilling, that became one of the sponsors. So that distributor really was the nexus of all of these things for us and made the rest of it possible. St. Louis is a small city, and it seems like everybody here in the industry knows everybody else. So just knowing one person can unlock a lot of doors. Some other considerations. Again, St. Louis is small, so the availability of sake may be a challenge depending on your market area. Attendees consistently rated price and value as among the least important factors for them, which leads me to believe that we could charge more for these events, but it also that we should focus really on what we are offering rather than trying to find exactly the right price for something or trying to keep costs low. People really want an experience, so finding a unique experience to offer them and honing that aspect of the program versus paying so much attention to making sure people feel that the price is fair. It was a surprising result to me, but it's something that I definitely noticed and will keep in mind for future planning. And again, in terms of partners and relationships, for example, the bar that hosted this being able to sell those cocktails and making a fair amount of money on the night that they hosted our program was key. So finding what's in it for our partners was also really important. I can go through these very quickly. When I wrote up the report for Japan Foundation, I tried to summarize all of this that would be easy for other Japan American societies to digest. So the first event, the Evening of Sake Tasting, is great because it's easy. It's quick to plan. You can turn it around quickly. If you have a small audience you're trying to reach, and as a kind of, it could even be used as a loss leader to build a relationship with industry folks. So to start forging those relationships that'll lay the groundwork for future events. It does require a sake expert. It requires a decent sake selection to be available. And if you can, it would be best to leverage this event into bottle sales. So this venue was selling bottles there also. I think we could have done a better job of promoting that and leveraging that. The larger one would be great for a major keystone event or an annual event for the year. I see a lot of potential for raising more money than we made, even though it was relatively successful for one of our events. It was also great for cultivating a large and diverse audience. So people who weren't necessarily coming for the event, but were just at that outdoor park, seeing that it was going on, could be introduced to your event. and your society, for example. It's also good for situations where you don't happen to have a sake expert. Patricia was there for us. She did presentations on the half hour, but we definitely did not need it. It wasn't integral to the event, and you could easily do this without that component of it. It is a larger event, so it's more difficult to coordinate this kind of thing. It requires a large venue to have all the space for the folks on the inside. And renting that venue and all of the equipment and all of that stuff and all of these moving parts means it's a higher financial risk if you're going to take it on. The third one I loved because it's really easy and it's a low risk. You just find a restaurant that's willing to partner with you. You get their price, you upcharge it, and then turn everything over to them. You don't necessarily need a sake expert to do this event. I don't think the beverage manager for the restaurant could probably fill in enough to make this to fill in that gap for folks. And you could also use this to build a relationship with a restaurant that you might want to use for another purpose, a VIP dinner or something like that. It is more expensive, so you're going to be dealing with a slightly older, more well-to-do audience, and it also depends highly on the quality and the ability of the restaurant to pull this thing off. And the last one is great as a new experience, reaching a younger audience. I feel like it's more likely to get into a things to do this weekend section of a local newspaper. And again, you don't need a sake expert to pull this one off. We barely used Patricia at all. She was more an advisory role. She had no role in the event itself this time. It does require a partner in the bar or restaurant willing to do this. Ideally, someone or a bar that does these kinds of events, cocktail contests. Because of all of these other things, it's difficult to organize. Recruiting the bartenders, to be the contestants, we relied a lot on our industry partners for that. So the industry partners really played a larger role in this event. Right, that's my last slide. So I'll stop there and I will turn things over to Wes to make sure he can come in. And I could take questions now, or we can save them until after Wes is done.
Let's wait till after Wes is done. For anyone that has questions for Wes, he has to leave promptly at 2 o'clock. So I would say please ask them at the end of his session promptly. Thank you. Over to you, Wes.
Thank you, Niles, and thank you, Andy and Makiko, for this opportunity to speak to your group. It's great to be here, and I have some close friends already on this call, so it's great to see them as well. So let me just, I thought today I'd talk about three main things. One is give you kind of an overview of what the North American sake scene is and what our role at the Sake Brewers Association of North America is in this industry. And then talk a bit about what I think are the promising potentialities of sake in the US-Japan space. And for those of you who don't know me, I have most of my career has actually been in US-Japan relations at the policy level. I made a bit of a career shift several years ago and taking on this role as president of the Sake Brewers Association. But most of my career has been spent in the think tank arena in Washington and other cities working on US-Japan relations and Northeast Asia relations. But I do see sake as being a really important new element in the bilateral relationship. So I'll talk a bit about that, and then I thought I'd talk about how we can work together very pragmatically to collaborate on projects involving sake. So just to begin, a little bit of background. So sake, so the United States market is a really important market for sake, especially Japanese sake exports. In recent years, the U.S. was the #1 export market for Japanese sake. You may know that the sake industry in Japan has been in a decades-long decline. So in a sense, the U.S. market is giving Japanese sake a new lease on life. So that's, I think, an important thing to keep in mind. And so I see this role of building the sake industry here in the U.S. as actually a really important one, not just for American consumers, but for Japanese producers of sake. in more recent years, however, China has superseded the US in terms of its imports of Japanese sake. I don't think that's a bad thing. All this means a net growth for many Japanese sake producers. But we're still a very important market for Japan. The still sake in the US market is a fraction of the overall alcoholic beverage market here. So it's really small, but according to some market studies, the sake industry has the potential to be something close to like a $4 billion a year industry. So there's a lot of room for growth if we do things the right way. Along with this growth has been a really interesting, I think, phenomenon, which is the growth of American craft sake breweries across the country. And that's really where my association comes in. There's now a little over 24 sake breweries across the United States and Canada and Mexico. And we represent the bulk of those sake producers in North America. We were established in 2019 with basically three main pillars of our mission. One is to help sake producers themselves in whatever capacity we can in terms of helping them with their production, helping them to access ingredients, equipment, share information. The other pillar of our mission is to help improve and enhance sake knowledge amongst American consumers through things like programming and seminars and things like that. And then the third pillar is to lobby for laws and regulations that are conducive to industry growth. So those were our original raison d'etres, if you will. But what I've found we're doing more of, and that I've been really spending the bulk of my energies and time working on, is really building a sake community as a whole across the continent. And what I mean as a whole, I mean, even though we started off with a real focus on sake brewers in North America, what I want to be is the entity that supports everyone who has an interest in sake in North America. So not just sake producers here, but sake producers from Japan, retailers, distributors, sake equipment manufacturers and importers, ingredient purveyors. So as you may know, sake is made of rice and koji. I'm really proud to say that we have three prominent and prestigious Japanese koji manufacturers who are members of our association now. So I see us being a bigger tent than our original mandate had. And so to me, that's very exciting, and it means it opens up the possibilities for a whole lot more engagement with entities on both sides of the Pacific. So I'd also encourage your members to think of us in that light, that we're not just focused on pushing sake. We're really trying to sort of take the industry as a whole and to grow it as a whole. So we do this through a number of different activities. I'm really proud to say that we've been participating in the Sakura Matsuri that the Japan American Society of Washington, D.C. hosts through Ryan's leadership. That's been a really fun experience for me. The first time we did this, which was, I guess, 2 years ago, I had no idea how it would go. We had several of our producers pouring sake, and I thought this is either going to be, a wild success, or there's going to be crickets in the background. It turned out to be the former. We were swamped with people, just lines and lines and lines of people. I estimate 2,000 people came through our tent I think that was a one-day event that year. Was it two, Ryan? Maybe it was two. Anyway, there was 2,000 people that came through the tent. So a lot of exposure through that. And to me, what was really, really fun was when people would come from, different parts of the country, Kentucky, and they come and they'd never had sake before. And here we have the Void sake brewers from Lexington, Kentucky, pouring their sakes. And you should see the reactions of people when they see that sake. Like, this is the first time they've ever had sake, and they didn't really know much about it, but they assumed it's all made in Japan. And when they find out it's made in their home state, it's such an exciting experience for them. And so the energy that produces is really fantastic and special. And it's something that we can do, really across the country. We can replicate that because we do now have breweries across the country and many of your chapter cities. So think of it that way as well. So the Sakuramatsu we have a American Craft Sake Festival that we do annually. We first did this in Asheville, North Carolina, and those were really great events. We have a brewer there in Asheville, and then this year we had our festival in Charlottesville, Virginia, at North American Sake Brewery, which was very successful. We teamed up with actually micro beer breweries in the Richmond area who were making koji beer that we helped to promote as well. So here again, I'm talking about expanding the community. It's not just sake, it's networking via the ingredients of sake to expand our constituency. So that was very successful. We were really pleased to have then Deputy Chief of Mission Skada-san come and join us at the festival, DCM of the Japanese Embassy in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Tomita came to visit the North American Sake Brewery in Charlottesville soon after he arrived in Washington. So we've been really pleased to have close ties with the Embassy of Japan. And the embassy has also supported our what we call a Sake Stakeholders Summit, which is a meeting of key leaders across the industry to talk strategically about the direction of the sake industry in North America. So we included Japanese sake brewers, American sake brewers, importers, distributors, retailers, sake educators in this. And then we had a reception on Capitol Hill, and pleased to see the NAJAS folks there. And Ryan helped us with his contact list to reach out to his membership for that event. But we're pleased to say that we had 6 congressional co-hosts of that reception. 2 standing senators came to it. So, for a little, a fledgling nonprofit in a fledgling industry to have 6 members of Congress co-host a reception like this on Capitol Hill was really something. And I think it speaks to kind of our ability to reach out into constituencies and districts that have now sake entities in them. So another thing to think about. But we do other activities, webinars, instructional webinars. We are doing more and more education themed programs. So for instance, we brought a handful of American brewers to Japan in the summer, to Sadogashima in Niigata Ken, to learn hands-on sake brewing techniques at a sake brewery there. Obata Shuzo, and we're going to be doing, that's going to be a regular program, so we're going to be doing that annually. That's probably something that we're going to expand as well, and maybe do that in different parts of Japan. But that opens up again sort of new areas for education exchange. We can do exchanges with rice and agribusiness interests. So that's kind of what we're trying to do beyond just sake. And so again, I think that sake represents a whole new and exciting, I think, avenue and channel for bilateral engagement. I think it's really, and I say this, as a student of U.S.-Japan relations now for many years, that it's really vital that we always think ahead of the curve, that we think about how we can further engage our two peoples. We can't just rest on our laurels and say, sushi's been really popular, so let's just, emphasize sushi. That's great. I love sushi, but I think we need to look beyond that. Always look for new avenues for engagement. And I see sake really as having just unlimited potential with that. And again, if we think about the market, the potential market growth of sake is only going to become a larger and larger presence on Americans' dinner tables moving forward. And so let's be a part of that. Let's be, the engines of that growth. And as sake becomes mainstreamized, and that's really what I'm trying to do at the association, that's a part of mainstreamizing, if you will, a bit of Japanese culture across the United States. And to me, it's so powerful when that kind of a trend is natural. This is not a top-down kind of trend. This is really something that begins with everyday Americans having, developing an interest in something new and something that is, delicious and wonderful to drink and to pair with classic American dishes. So, I think that's another key asset that we have. And again, kind of coming from a Japan expert background, it's really interesting to me to see my brewer members. Many of them don't really have an inherent interest in Japan. Their entry point into sake was not as Japanophiles, which is a little bit of the reverse trend of what my generation of Japan experts came from, where we developed an interest in Japan, then we became, US Japan security experts or whatever. In my case, with these brewers, it's they tried sake once, they fell in love with it. There was something about it that made them want to brew it at home, and then after brewing it at home and learning more about it, they wanted to actually, start a business around it. And so, and starting a business, they learn more about sake. They learn more about Japanese culture that way. They learn words like koji and seimabuai and all kinds of Japanese phrases that they're throwing around now without really speaking any Japanese, but they know all the sake terminology. It's really interesting. It's really interesting to see that. And if you see the consumers as an extension of that, then you really see the potential for sake to really reach out and touch people in ways that I think are really important. So how can we work with NAJAS members? Working with Ryan over the last couple of years has been just a seamless process. And we both cut our teeth at the same organization in DC, so maybe that's no surprise. But nonetheless, I think that we're all kind of kindred spirits. And knowing some of your other chapter leaders, I think that's the case. I've known Makiko for many years, even shared the same office space. So all that is to say, I think that we're a pretty easy fit in terms of partner organizers, and we can help out with things like the events that Chip put together. I think the caveats, Chip, that you mentioned of like not having a sake expert on hand, we can provide those kind of really deeply knowledgeable experts or brewers. It's great when the brewers themselves are there because they can explain their product, how they made it, all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that bottle of sake. It's a really compelling story. Another really compelling story, by the way, is much of this is something people don't realize, but much of our rice actually doesn't come from Japan. It comes from American farmers and American farms, mainly in California and Arkansas. And so if you think about the whole farm to table craze, this is another dimension of that, right? And so if you talk about, locally sourced ingredients that go into locally produced sake, it's a really compelling story for a lot of people. Just another part of the narrative that can be fit into, a lecture about sake, for instance. So what I generally, what I would propose is that, just to be, to make things really simple, is that, if a local chapter, for instance, wanted to do a sake event, they could take the lead in terms of on the ground organizing and planning and all of that. And we would provide essentially the content. We would provide the experts, the speakers, the product, and we could certainly help with providing the sake and selling it possibly. So that would be the general division of labor that I see. One key thing, and Ryan asked this of Chip earlier, is the licensing is a really important thing to consider. So a lot of local municipalities and other places have restrictions on what you can pour, what alcoholic beverages you can pour at certain events. There is no one size fits all. I can't tell you if you do this, this, and this, it will be permitted in your locality. No, there's a thicket of regulations across the country. So you will have to be familiar with those and be able to navigate those in order for us to then feasibly pull this off together. But assuming we can get through those obstacles or over those obstacles, we can definitely work on something. And as Chip said, I think distributors are really key too, because unless you have a brewer that's actually in your city or state, it's really hard to get our people interested in pouring their sakes in a place that's beyond their market. So if they have a distributor that's distributing in your city or region, then that becomes all the more appealing to them to be, to participate in an event like this. And also distributors are important because for a lot of states, you need to have the distributor themselves with a license to sell, able to pour the sake at their event. So that's kind of what I thought I'd mention today in a nutshell.
Thank you, Weston, for that wonderful explanation and sharing of information about Hispanic and the sake industry, especially here in North America. Very appreciative and very. We hope that we can be a part of more events and that you will be a part of more events going forward with the Pan American societies in the months and days and possibly years to come. So thank you for that. We'd like to open the floor now to questions. If anyone has any specific questions or things they want to share or ask, please do so now. Like I said before, Weston has to leave at 2:00. So if you have any questions for him, I please ask that you share them at this stage right now. Thank you. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Andy and Makiko for hosting, and Niles, thanks for moderating. Sorry for being late, just completely flaky. Yeah, I wanted to, number one, endorse this format of discussion and reiterate, I think, what Andy said, which is, for speaking as somebody who missed the last one of these but fully intended to be there, Niles has kindly distributed the video to me. And it's going to be a resource that we're going to draw on, as I hope this will for others. But I guess I wanted to reiterate one thing that Weston said and sort of expand beyond a little bit, to say that the partnership with the Japan American Society of Washington, D.C. with ESPANA has been so productive, partly because our missions overlap. It is very much in the interest of our organization and presumably all other Japan American societies for ESPANA to succeed. And there really isn't any other network, I think, that can quite as neatly help, with maybe the exception of Consul General Shindo and, of course, the Japanese consulates around the country. But the Japan American societies are the best kind of national network that somebody like Weston could reach out to say, hey, we've got the brewer in Denver. Can we do the event with with you? You've got the mailing list. You've got the local expertise. And the flip side of that is, these brewers are making really nice products in many cases now. Some of them you cannot distinguish from a Japanese master produced sake. But their success is no guarantee, partly because I think that the industry seems to be at this moment where if it can cross the threshold from inadequate volume to sustain the business to adequate volume to sustain the business, then dominoes might start to fall where the regulatory environment becomes more favorable and the distribution chain becomes more sophisticated and kind of lowers the barrier to entry. Anyway, so I really think that not only can we as societies be aided significantly, through events like CHIPS and of course our Sakura Matsuri, by partnering with Espana and or American brewers or Japanese brewers who are also interested in promoting the industry in this country. But on the other hand, we desperately want this organization and these brewers to succeed. And so it's sort of on us to make sure that we can use our platforms for them to succeed. That's not a question, and I know we're out of time, but basically the one question I wanted to ask was of Chip. It's two questions, really. It's about the audience and their desires, right? If we promote sake to people who already know Japan, that's a certain audience that we're cultivating, right? But as Wes alluded, the other opportunity there, and I noticed in your tasting event, the food looked to be Western. The other audience to cultivate is the people who don't care anything about Japan and maybe never will, but for whom sake is just like, that's really good. Where was this all my life? So did you have a sense of direction? Who were you doing the outreach to, and where did you find the most satisfaction and most success?
We definitely had in mind, particularly for the restaurant event, that we did not want to do that with a Japanese restaurant. One of the objectives was to demonstrate that you can pair sake with non-Japanese food. The restaurant that we happened to choose this time, the chef had a couple of nods to Japanese cuisine. The taco was in there, but it was a Western menu. I think there was a pork belly piece in there. So that was a conscious choice on our point to show sake can go with Western food or non-Japanese food. The smaller events were filled up basically with folks who are either members or on our mailing list. When you only have 25 tickets or 30 tickets available and you send out a blast to your mailing list, those folks are going to show up. The sake cocktail contest that was promoted heavily by the bar and our other partners, and the Tower Grove, the park event, the large outdoor one, those saw a lot more strangers to us. So those two events, I think, have a lot more potential to reach a new audience. The outdoor event in the park because it's large. The other one because we were partnered, the sake cocktail contest, because we were partnering with so many different people that had audiences of their own. They were able to draw folks in. So each one of the bartenders that was competing brought in folks. The bar itself brought in folks. The judges brought in folks. So those two events, I would say, reached a wider stranger audience to us. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I got one for Wes before we lose him. On your membership and your interest in reaching out to stakeholders, you mentioned how important distributors are to being able to do a fine series of events the way Chip pulled off in St. Louis. And I've got your flyer, and I assume the website has all of your members. But the members may not include the distributors. How can our membership tap into that key network?
Great question. Yeah, there are a number of large distributors now that have large sake portfolios. So Republic National Distribution Company, RNDC, is one of the largest distribution companies in the world. And they have licenses pretty much across the country. So that's one place to look. And when it comes to more sort of local distributors or regional distributors, I can't give you all that much guidance, but your members shouldn't have too much of a problem like Googling entities that are in their local areas to try to find them. So that would be one thing. If you do have, I would recommend that you that your members look at our membership list. So on our website, it has the full list of brewer members. So go there and see if there is a brewer in the state where your chapter is, and then let me know, and I'm happy to put you in touch with that brewer, who can then help guide you in terms of distributors and everything else that we could possibly collaborate on. So great question though. Yeah.
Thank you.
With that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to sign off, but thank you again, everyone, for this opportunity. It's great to speak to you all, and I look forward to following up, and encourage everyone who's interested to reach out to me. I've put in the chat box my email, so feel free to email me if you want to follow up with anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wes.
Weston.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone in any other topics you want to discuss or ask Chip while he's here?
We might also invite the Consul General, one of our great Nihonshu ambassadors, if the Consul General has any comments or.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I have actually one question. That is, Chip, you mentioned educational lecture. When you talk about sake, there are various aspects. For example, the uniqueness of how to make sake, or the differences, the different categories of sake, like Junmai-shu, Junmai Daiginjo, Jozoshu, and so on. And also cultural aspect, how sake affects our society or life, or on what occasions we Japanese drink sake, and so on. So there's various aspects. And when you mentioned the educational lecture, on what aspects of sake you put emphasis on. And the reason is that I have the impression that people, the more they know about sake, particularly the differences of sake, what's the difference between Daiginjo and Junmai-shu, for example, then they become more interested, and they might like to drink sake. And also, as a Japanese diplomat, I want to promote mutual understanding. Through sake, people can learn about Japanese society, or for example, izakaya culture that is very unique. So that sort of thing, I emphasize. I want to promote, try to seek understanding of local people. But anyway, so this I was interested in this educational lecture. What kind of lecture do you think it's effective in promoting sake? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you, Consul General. The first event we did was the one that was most heavily educational. I think that's the one you're referring to. I would say that the topics and aspects that Patricia delved into were fairly high level, not a lot of detail. So she went over in particular the different styles, as you mentioned, Daiginjo, Junmai, what those words mean, those nomenclatures. That was one piece. Also, a high level view of the process of making sake, and in contrast to beer or wine or spirit making that folks may be familiar with here. So what are the differences there? And then the regions. Of course, the ingredients and how that ties into the region. So one region might be a popular sake producing region because of the water that's there. Personally, I would have liked a little more detail about that. Personally, I would appreciate an event where you have maybe different sakes from the same producer, but in the different styles, so that you can really start to taste those differences. I think, though, that for our audiences, there are the percentage of folks that really want that level of detail is maybe fairly small. The sense I got from the feedback was people wanted to try a variety of different sakes and learn about each one of those, rather than do a more systematic exploration to learn those styles. So those are the kinds of things that the sommeliers, the sake experts, are doing to try to be able to distinguish those. I don't think that has a hugely broad appeal. I think more popular is tasting a variety, and particularly unusual varieties of sake. So if you have a large liquor store in your region and people can go in there and they see the 3 or 4 sake that are available there, they're not as interested in tasting those at a sake tasting event as they are in something that's more of a smaller production, harder to find, niche offering. I think that's what folks are interested in. Does that address your question well enough?
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. And one thing, I do almost every time I do sake tasting event is that, I ask the guest to try various kinds of sake, starting with the Junmaishu, Junmai Ginjo, Daiginjo, and so on. Then in the end, I do blind tasting, and I ask the guest to guess what kind of sake it is. And that means educational lecture plus, in a way, test how much, how well guests understand the difference. And it's kind of fun, and also people enjoy trying to guess what it is. So that's one thing I do. And I wanted to make another comment. I think in your lecture, probably a cocktail contest or something like that. There was a long queue and so on. And when I do event, Andy was there the last time I had a small reception. I asked my staff to pour sake in small cups and put them on the tray, so that guests can freely, take whatever sake that they want, so that they don't have to ask the bartender to pour sake. And I noticed that way, guests drank a lot of sake. If I ask my staff to pour sake each time, guest asks, then it takes time, and guests, some guests they don't want to bother bartender to pour sake. But if you put it on a tray, then it's much easier. And I noticed guests are willing to try more different kinds of sake. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. I also really appreciated you talking about the importance of sake in Japanese culture. That's actually an aspect I hadn't really considered, but I think it might be interesting more for the Japanophiles, the folks that are already in our contact list, to contextualize sake in Japanese, something that I think we've overlooked, but I think it would be interesting. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I think people would be interested in that.
Yeah, if I can, 2 points. First, to the Consul General, hats off on that presentation model. I think you might have been looking at me when you talked about guest sampling a lot. It was enjoyed, and I'm glad I wasn't driving home from your from your residence. And also to Chip, really hats off on producing not just one but 4 wonderful events and being able to do a presentation and show the different objectives, the different audiences that you can reach out to, and the analytics that you compiled are outstanding as well. So to you and to Japan Foundation New York for having the vision to support that, that's great. And I just wanted to chime in on that last point from both of you, that the hooks into other things we're already touching, the role of sake in holidays and traditions and customs. We're coming up to New Year's, and of course it's so important there. Ties into religion, to Shintoism. Sake and sumo have a connection. There's just so many ways we can draw that audience that wants that, but recognize there's another audience, those who are really wanting to delve into a niche and are drawn to the product more than the culture. So perfect job in appealing to the whole range.
Thank you.
Any last parting questions or thoughts to share? If not, I think we can end on that.
Nathan-san had a
Yeah,
question.
Yuki had a hand.
I have a question for Mr. Chip. So you mentioned that dinner and sake pairing is the easiest way or your favorite one, and this one doesn't needed a expert for sake. So I was wondering, how were you able to how was the process in selecting sake? Because for me, like, I don't drink sake, I'm allergic to it, but like I was just wondering if there was a process in like choosing what kind of sake is better for a meal, or was it all did the restaurant decided everything for that?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. So to be clear, we did use the sake expert for that event, and I think that all else being equal, it would be better to have one. But I think you could do that kind of event without one in a pinch. Though I think that you would need to lean on the restaurant a little bit for that and need to have a more amenable restaurant with a beverage manager that maybe knows a little something about sake. So maybe in that case, you might want to go to a Japanese or Japanese owned restaurant, for example. The process essentially for us, because we had the sake expert from the beginning, was yes, Patricia knew the manager of the restaurant. As I said, in St. Louis, so it seems like almost everybody knows everybody in this industry. So they worked well together. So they worked together to choose the sake. So Patricia worked with the restaurant manager and the chef to choose the sakes that she thinks she wanted to highlight. And then they developed a menu with each one of those and worked back and forth that way. My only point was that for the ease for Japan America Society, the restaurant took care of everything. It was their space. They did the menu. They did the service. We just got a price per person from them and added something to it to make a profit. Otherwise, it was very turnkey. But it all depends on finding the right restaurant in the beginning. Once you have that, it's very easy for the Japan America Society to pull off the event then.
Thank you.
Sure. And if there are no more questions, that would be, if anybody has any more specific questions about any one of the events, or more specific questions as you just asked about the process that went into them, I'm happy to do that offline or by email, if you like.
Great. I think with that, we'll conclude. Thank you, Chip, for your time this afternoon and sharing about your successes with sake programming in St. Louis, and thoughts. We definitely have a lot to decipher and think about from our ends. on that end. So thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us today. It was lovely to have you and to talk about sake and kind of how sake can help us all with our programming and kind of help strengthen or bolster or just have people learn more about U.S.-Japan relations in that aspect. So with that, we will conclude here. We think we will have our third session in NAJAS Share in January. So be on the lookout for our flyer for that. And like I said before, thanks, and hope to see you again soon.
And that one will be covering baseball and Japanese relations. So, Niles, very nice job. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chip, Consul General, Miyuki, Amy, everybody for participating. Wes and Ryan did a great job. I just wanted to add my thanks and wishes that everybody has a great time in their Bonenkai, Zannenkai, Shinnenkai season to come, and make sure that sake is a part of it where it can be. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and thanks for making this possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.